there's a lot of conversation about the environmental and social challenges that society is facing and the need for businesses to do something about it and for business schools, therefore, to support business in doing something about it. But there's kind of a question of leadership. And if we think just about the problem of climate change, we know that next month there will be the 29th United Nations Framework Convention discussion about how to solve the problem of climate change. So clearly, if they've been talking about it for 29 years, we don't really have the solutions. And there's also a lot of discussion about who goes first. Do businesses wait for governments to tell them what to do? Or do governments rely on businesses to take leadership? So in this whole situation where the problems are clear, but the solutions are not clear, that has really spilled over into the business schools, because the business schools are training the leaders of tomorrow who will be leading businesses and who will be taking over this dance between government and businesses about how to solve the problem. So we thought that writing an article about what business schools are actually doing would be a useful thing to do. This broader discussion has become quite controversial in recent years because of pushback against the idea that there is a consensus across all of the business community that the problems are imminent and that businesses have an important role to play in solving them. Everybody reads in the papers about the pushback against ESG, environment, social, and governance frameworks in business. And so we thought we need to bring this discussion into the business schools. There's a lot of discussion about rethinking the model of capitalism that we follow. There are differences in the approach to that in Europe and the United States. And we think that students need to know all that. So given that background, we thought, why don't we look at and give a presentation about what business schools are actually doing, how far business schools can go in preparing the leaders of business leaders for tomorrow in solving these problems, and how far they can't go, what challenges there are. So that's really what we tried to cover in this article. We lay out a menu of what business schools are actually doing, how far they've come, and what are the challenges that they face in going further in this area. Also, we look at the really strong demand from some students for business schools to do more in this area, and the demand for some businesses to prepare students for them. But it is not universal. There is not a universal acknowledgement that this is a problem. There's not a universal agreement on how to do it or even whether to do it. I think what business schools can do is at least provide a space and a platform for students to have a discussion about the problems that we face, whether it's climate change, biodiversity, inequality, but also the framework for thinking about how to solve those problems. And increasingly, that means questioning the model of capitalism that we are training students to be employing as they bring the tools that we're teaching them to solve these problems. So there is a lot of discussion about stakeholder capitalism versus shareholder capitalism. And certainly for students, faculty, the university community that is convinced that we have environmental and social problems and is convinced that business schools have a role in trying to solve those, then taking an approach of thinking about shareholder capitalism as opposed to stakeholder capitalism is important. And in fact, increasingly there is a emerging consensus, certainly not an overwhelming majority consensus that thinking about a broader set of stakeholders aside from just the owners of the firm is an important component in this discussion. Once you have that conversation, then what we try to do in business schools and what our article explains that many of the business schools that are leading in the area of sustainability are doing is a multifold approach. Part of it is employing more faculty who are teaching and doing research in areas related to climate change and sustainability. And that has its own problems, which are mainly resource-based. Particularly the public schools are resource constrained in terms of adding to the faculty. But we're doing a lot of that. And at Berkeley, former Dean Ann Harrison, adopted an approach to try to add 30 faculty to the overall complement of faculty. Many of those are specialized in sustainability. The next area that we're focusing on is the curriculum. We are trying to employ an approach that exposes all students to the climate change and sustainability content and imparts some tools for analyzing that, gives them frameworks by incorporating sustainability into core courses so that students have some basic literacy in climate and sustainability topics. There is a percentage of students who are really keen to get more involved in this area, really keen to either bring a sustainability framework to whatever job they do or to specialize in an area of sustainability. And so we have introduced at Haas a certificate program where students can take a number of credits and get a specialized certificate. Several other of the business schools also do that, MIT, Stanford, for instance. So that's a second step towards training our students in this area. And the third is introducing an actual dual degree between a university's environment school and the business school that students can opt to choose to get 2 degrees. That takes a bit longer, in our case, 2.5 years, in some schools, 3 years, where they would actually have 2 degrees and then go on to really bring specialized knowledge of climate and sustainability to whatever job they get as they go forward. We're also looking at what we call extracurricular programs, which are sort of internships and consulting opportunities where students get hands-on experience in working with companies in trying to solve sustainability and climate change challenges. So those are the main areas that we at Haas and many other of the business schools are doing to try to create a cohort of students and future business leaders who are well educated and literate and well versed in trying to solve these problems.